Hello and welcome to Podstreet, Writing WA's official podcast. I'm Shannon Britza and I'm the Operations Manager at Writing WA. I am very excited to welcome Sofija Stevanovic for this special episode of Podstreet in retrospective honour of ADHD Awareness Month. Sofija and I are both neurodivergent writers and arts workers who share a deep love of books, and I'm very pleased to have her with us today. Sofija is the coordinator of the Catherine Susanna Pritchard Writers Centre, a heritage-listed community hub located in the beautiful Perth Hills region. She is also a neurodivergent queer writer living on the unceded lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people. Sofija holds a Bachelor of Marketing and PR and is currently working on a Master of Arts in Creative Writing through Curtin University. When not working or writing about the wild and wonderful curiosities of neurodiverse existence, she spends her time reading, binging anime and drinking excessive amounts of coffee with her biggest supporters, cockatiels Phineas and Burb, on her shoulders, which is a lovely image. Welcome, Sofija.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you for coming on today. And so we're bonded in our membership of the Late Diagnosed ADHD Club. So ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is a developmental condition characterised by persistent levels of overactivity, inattention and impulsivity that affects approximately 1 in every 20 Australians. According to the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, absolute mouthful, ADHD comes in 3 main types, predominantly inattentive or hyperactive compulsive, or combined. Sofija, can you share the age you were when you were diagnosed, your type of ADHD, and what that diagnosis meant to you?
Yes, so I was diagnosed 3 years ago, which would make me 26 at a time. And I have the combined type, meaning that I'll get both the inattentive and the hyperactive and everything in between. Yay. But the diagnosis, I think, for me just meant that I could be kinder to myself, and that was why I sorted out. I feel like, for me at least, it felt like I was always one step behind everybody else. And so it kind of made me understand myself better and to sort of allow myself to stop before being, mean almost. Yeah, kind of like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? It was easier from then on to kind of accept that maybe I just work differently.
And hold more compassion.
Absolutely.
For yourself. I think that there is a lot of misconceptions and some judgment around neurodivergence, but I think the harshest critiques or opinions of ADHD people or autistic people are probably themselves. And that sort of internalized, why am I not keeping up with everyone else, or why is this so hard, can be, something that you carry, but a diagnosis can lift that.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's definitely an internal thing because there isn't any scale that you really measure up to. It's kind of your own, perception of things, and it somehow feels like perhaps not even a step behind, but just kind of to reach a step that I perceive as, the ideal. It takes me 150% of my energy and time and effort and focus, which, I often lack, unfortunately. So it kind of always feels like you're running behind. But I think it's definitely something perceived rather than real.
It's almost a parallel step, isn't it? Like, there's one path that might go more in a straight line and another path that goes curvy backwards and forwards at different velocities.
Yeah, I think diagnosis for me just helped me kind of enjoy the curvy and just let myself ride the curvy wave rather than try and push the straight. So
thank you. I'm combined as well, and I'm learning, and I guess both of us diagnosed late in life being females, it's commonly missed because you don't present in childhood with the stereotypical presentation of running around in circles or jumping up and down on the couch, and it can be more internal hyperactivity, which is something I learnt myself only in the last few years. So, as you know, there are many challenges, but also strengths in having a neurodivergent brain. And I did want to touch on a personal feeling of mine that matches some in our community, not being personally fond of the term superpower. This term has become more popular in recent years when referring to both ADHD and autism, and as well-meaning as it is meant to be. I feel that it does a disservice to the reality of neurodivergence, which is often an incredibly complex and nuanced and tiring experience of getting through each day. But having said that, I'd love to know what you see are your strengths in your version of living life with ADHD.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, with the superpower bit, especially because you would assume, superpower is something you can control and something that just kind of, you can direct it somewhere.
That's such a good point.
That's not necessarily how it works. So I think for me, if we were to call it a superpower, it would probably be the resilience, I feel like, and flexibility in the way I perceive things or in the way that I can accept things. So it's very, at least personally, it's very easy for me to change course and to just kind of, take the punches as they come and do something else. And that's totally fine. It doesn't necessarily bring me down. So I think that's a really cool thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Agility.
Yeah, that's the word.
Pivot, yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I would like to have that one. Yeah. I would love to talk to you about your master's thesis, because I'm aware it's a fantastically creative project, and I love the background of how it came to be, particularly as it is really uniquely neurodivergent journey. And I would love for you to share this story.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. I think I was obviously supposed to pick a project, and my mind just wouldn't settle on one. And every time I did settle, it just kept kind of, oh no, that's not good enough. It's not, what if I'm not interested? And I think for me, that's because it's very actually hard for me to imagine anything beyond the current moment. So committing to something, an idea or a project for a long time, or what I perceive as long time, was unimaginable. And so I had a really horrible 4-night, awful sleeping patterns, couldn't make it work. I was 2 days behind on actually submitting the assessment proposal. And you were there on the KSP balcony on the 4th day of this happening. And I was sitting there completely desperate, just trying to get through this. And you were like, oh, but why don't you kind of, put that experience, this experience that you're having right now, and make it into something creative, make it into a project. And I kind of sat there and it was like, yeah, that's amazing. And if I remember, it was, I said, I just go with the flood.
Yes.
And you were like,
go with the flood.
That's a perfect thing. Go with the flood. And I think that was the ideal sort of description of what the experience felt like. And so I went with it. And I think the project is essentially to try and almost simulate an experience of a neurodivergent brain, specifically ADHD, through metafiction. So that's something that I'm working on at the moment. And thank you again for helping me out with that idea.
I love what you're doing with this. I think it's really unique and going to add so much to the space to give that, to try and deliver that ADHD almost goggles perspective for a reader. And, you and I met almost 2 years ago in a transition at the KSP Writers Centre, and we clicked very quickly, and then it came out that we're both neurodivergent, and that's often the case, is that neurodivergent people will click with others. And I've really personally enjoyed a lot of our conversations about ADHD and neurodivergence and different kinds of brains, and I stumbled onto something called writing autistically in nature, and I think that's what I was talking to you about. That's what I'm applying to my current project, which is delivering a reading experience that encapsulates a different perspective of how a brain works. But I'd never heard of writing ADHD in nature, but I love, it's very easily transitionable. That's a word. I'll just make that word up on the spot, which is also something that we can do.
I like it. Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I know you're taking you've picked different aspects of probably more challenges of the ADHD experience, and that's going to come out through different chapters.
Yeah, I was hoping that doing something like that, and it would be both the author kind of, self-inserting in a way, but also stimulating that experience for the reader. And whether it's a neurodivergent reader who just wants to kind of have a laugh and be like, I can see how that happened, or somebody who hasn't experienced it to just, almost feel through it and be in that moment, and perhaps give them a better understanding of what we go through day to day, or what at least I do. So, I think it's an interesting project. I think it definitely keeps my mind interested, which is a miracle.
So, yes. Yeah. Because you need to be sitting with this, is it a year or 2 years?
It's a year. Yeah. So to me, that's a long time. So it's definitely awesome that I found something that I can almost flow with, go with the flood, and just let it change as my mind changes as well.
But the core subject still remains interesting. Yeah. Yes, I love that. It's such a beautiful, worthwhile project, and I can't wait to read it myself. I think it'll be an excellent contribution to literature. So having ADHD, as we both do, is actually not commonly disclosed in public. It's becoming more so, but it's still something that people can feel ashamed of having. It can also be something that people will avoid getting assessed for, even if they suspect that they have symptoms that are on the neurodivergent ADHD spectrum. Do you think that this is likely to change in the future? And would you encourage people to seek a diagnosis?
Oh, absolutely. I think... there are many ways to deal with ADHD, so with any sort of neurodivergent experience, really. And it's not a must, but I think what it does is it just brings awareness and perhaps understanding and kindness into the world, into the workforce, into any kind of situation, because it can be very difficult to navigate sometimes because of, again, as we said at the start, that kind of self-doubt or self-internalize,
criticism, ableism.
And all of that stems from sort of attempting to fit in somewhere where you don't feel like you do. And that's like what I feel could change if people were more open about it, if people were more comfortable just kind of saying, yes, I have ADHD, I'm neurodivergent, and we can all sort of adjust and adapt and be more compassionate to each other, I feel.
Everyone has their own space in the world,
100%.
And I think all those spaces are different, and that's okay.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, it's interesting that one in every 20 Australians have ADHD, and I'm aware of someone with autism as well, that autistic people commonly co-occurring with ADHD is very closely linked. So it's a huge part of the population who think differently, and the more that we've, I think particularly in the last 10 years, learnt about the different presentations, that it's not necessarily, I'm speaking specifically autistic, it's not all Rain Man and Sheldon Cooper and other depictions. I don't know of a mainstream ADHD character, to be honest, in fiction, having reflected on that. That's interesting. Maybe that's something that someone could take up the banner for. But I completely agree. I think there are barriers as well. It's important to acknowledge of getting a diagnosis, that it can, it's a very long wait time. Whether you go private, if you go public, it can be years, even private, it's months, if you can get in at all to see the right person. Even with Medicare rebates, if you can get that, there's a big gap. So it is a difficult thing financially, as well as that sort of emotional journey to seeking that for yourself. With a psychiatrist diagnosis, that's really important if you want to pursue medication route. But I wanted to point out that you don't need a psychiatrist diagnosis or that formal diagnosis if you don't necessarily feel you need medication, because not everyone does. There are other strategies and things you can learn. So you can read a lot of information on websites and in the neurodiverse community to find something for yourself that you may or may not feel comfortable sharing with others. But if you know someone in your circle who's neurodivergent, I would encourage you to talk to them as well and have a safe space to talk through maybe what's happening for you.
Yeah.
I would like to mention that through your work with the KSP Writers Centre, the new Caruso Inclusive Residency Program that you and I co-founded last year. Very lucky to have secured funding from Creative Australia for that amazing program. And I bring it up because I'd love to hear a bit more about the program, but also because I think it's a wonderful example of the magic that can happen when two neurodivergent arts workers or any kind of workers come together over shared passion and just spark something for the wider good, I hope.
Yeah.
Could you please tell us a bit about the program?
Oh, that's such a wonderful initiative. I'm so glad and so excited. It's nearly here. It's, we, thanks to Creative Australia, we are offering 20 placements. It's a residency and they will have bespoke support and just an opportunity really to work on their projects. And we were specifically interested in kind of opening up the writing sector and the writing industry to people who are in marginalized communities. And I think that was really important to us, really, to try and kind of make it so less barriers are there, at least for this one thing, if nothing else. And it's been a really, really wonderful experience to think about it, to design it, to think how we can almost, make it personal to the people who will be doing the residency. So yeah, I remember us doing a little brainstorm session and we were just bouncing off each other, and that was the magic, I think. It was so flow. And I think your mind being the more organized one and my mind being and what about this and what about that and what about it? And it was just awesome to have this happen.
It was a beautiful melding.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely.
I read a term yesterday, maybe a different term to the word hyperfocus that people are familiar with, called cognitive dynamism.
Oh,
and I love this, and I think that might have been what happened.
I think that's what happened. That's awesome. Yeah.
Would you be able to share some support structures or practices that have been really beneficial to you in balancing your very diverse life of you're working full-time, studying for your masters, your own personal creative pursuits, your personal life, and balancing that with your neurodivergent needs? Is there anything that you find has been really helpful?
I mean, okay, full disclosure, 9 times out of 10, I feel like I'm in a absolute chaotic whirlwind. I have no idea what's going on. And then I kind of grasp at the little strands and I try to make it all work. And it's been honestly a learning experience. My whole life's been one, really. But especially in the last kind of 3 years since the diagnosis, I've been trying to find ways to make it easier to go through, because it can sometimes feel like you're literally just in a big box just rolling down this hill and you have no idea where you're going.
In a box, that seems really painful. I love that image.
For me, I think what works is just trying different things and allowing it to change. So if something works on a Monday, that doesn't mean it's going to work on a Tuesday. For me, the lists, love-hate relationship right there. So I just now have accepted they may or may not work, and I just abandon ship if they don't. Having somebody to bounce ideas off of, having, and just kind of definitely being kind to yourself and not sort of putting extra pressure so then you feel overwhelmed at the end of it. Not always successful.
Yeah. I think it's a lifelong, probably ongoing journey.
Yeah.
How do you be kind to yourself?
I think it's just stopping in the moment when that overwhelm starts really piling, and that feeling of, I could use inadequacy, I guess, but it is the internal one, kind of becomes too much. Just kind of stopping and saying, okay, that is not how it is. your brain works a bit differently. It's okay. Like nothing's going to be destroyed. The world's not going to end. And you can change this. You can do something else. And that makes it easier in that moment. But yeah.
That's a good tip. I know that, and probably a lot of people do this as well, we send memes.
Oh, yes.
I've found I'm an introverted person, but I really love the neurodiverse community, and I'd love to meet more people, but that's hard when I stay in my little box. But there are so many Instagram pages and groups that there's this innate understanding of the neurodivergent experience, and the memes lighten it up. It's very, if you know, you know, and it's nice to share that, and you feel less alone, even just looking at those memes to go, oh, someone else
feels this way.
This way. Oh, look over there. There is a bird out the window, and I'm going to start talking about this bird now, which literally happened to you and me
several times. It is, it's interesting. I think conversations between neurodivergent people can be really interesting and dynamic and just ever changing. And I think in general, though, that's what works, because we don't expect it or our conversations to flow in one direction. I don't sit there and I'm like, oh no, we must. It's kind of like, yeah, we'll touch on this, we'll swing there, we'll kind of come back to that. And we might not. We might not. And it works. Yeah. So that's awesome. Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you. Speaking of dynamic chats, I really enjoyed our chat today, and it was just a joy and a pleasure as always. Absolutely. If people want to connect with you, Sofija, or discover more about the KSP Writers Centre and what you do, how can they find you?
Well, you can always visit the centre. I'm there almost every day, if not every day. And the centre is open every working day from 10 to 2. You can reach us via email. You can go to our website. You can find all the information there. Social media, obviously. And yeah, but I prefer if you pop in and have a chat.
That's nice.
So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put up links to all those to the centre, and we'll add some resource links as well if anyone wants to know a little bit more about ADHD. And thank you so much for chatting today.
Thank you.